If you ever thought you made a bad decision, give yourself a break because I'm about to make your bad decision look like baby food. Remember Sparta, the Greek city-state that gave us lethal warriors and a cool movie about Leonidas? Let's dive into how the ancient world's most powerful states basically played itself into irrelevance through a spectacular combination of natural disasters, terrible policies, and an absolutely rigid dedication to maintaining their pure citizenship at all costs. Picture a society so obsessed with military excellence that they turned their entire state into one giant boot camp. Every male citizen went through an agoge, their famously brutal education system, and had to maintain contributions to their communal mess halls to keep their citizenship. Meanwhile, women could own property, progressive for that time, and the whole system was built on the backs of the enslaved helots who did all the actual work while Spartans focused on their military hobbies. And it worked great until it didn't. Let's talk about the start of the downfall in 464 BCE. Mother Nature decided to throw a wrench into Sparta's carefully planned society with a massive earthquake. Now, earthquakes are bad enough on their own, but this one had an impeccable, dramatic timing. It killed a significant number of young Spartans, particularly those in the agoge. But that wasn't even the worst part. The helots, particularly the Messenians, who were the entire conquered people forced into servitude, looked at the situation and thought, hey, all those guys who keep us enslaved are either dead or busy digging out their survivors, and the military training school just collapsed. What a convenient time for a revolution. And revolt they did. This kicked off the Third Messenian War, which would last for about a decade. Here's where the bad decisions got even worse. Athens, Sparta's ally at the time, sent troops to help put down the revolt. But Sparta, in a stunning display of paranoia and poor diplomatic skills, basically told them, thanks, but no thanks, we don't trust you, and sent them home. This brilliant move helped poison Sparta's relationship with Athens right before Athens entered its imperial phase. For real, Sparta? Stellar timing. So, earthquake kills off a bunch of people, Athens is about to be really pissed off, and Sparta tops it all off by implementing a policy that's even more restrictive when it comes to being a citizen of Sparta. To be a Spartan citizen, you need to be born to citizen parents, complete the agoge, maintain your contribution to the communal mess halls, and own enough land to support your contributions. Seems reasonable, right? Well, here's where things went sideways. Land started accumulating in fewer and fewer hands, particularly through inheritance. By the 3rd century BCE, Aristotle noted that women owned about 40% of Spartan land. Now, women owning property wasn't the problem. The problem was the concentration of wealth and land in fewer and fewer families. Now, before you ask, well, didn't these women have children who could inherit the land and become citizens? Yes, but it wasn't that simple. The problem was that wealthy women weren't having kids. Here's how it worked. Spartan heiresses basically married older established citizens, creating super wealthy family units rather than new independent households. Then, when these wealthy families had multiple sons and daughters, instead of dividing their land and property among them, they often kept estates intact, meaning only one son or daughter got everything. This means only one person could afford the expensive citizenship requirements. The rest, well, they lost their citizenship. This created a nasty feedback loop where rich women married rich men. Shocking, right? Poor citizens couldn't afford to marry or support future citizens, and you ended up with two Spartas, one super wealthy and one increasingly poor. Now, remember those citizenship requirements? One of them was maintaining contributions to the mess halls, which required owning enough land to support those contributions. You see where this is going? The numbers tell the story better than anything else. Early 5th century BCE, there was about 8,000 full citizens. By 371 BCE, there was roughly 1,500 citizens. And then by 244 BCE, there was around 700 citizens, with only about 100 families actually owning land. Speaking of 371 BCE, the devastating Battle of Leuctra occurred, where Sparta's invincible army got thoroughly trounced by Thebes. This wasn't just military defeat, it was an economic catastrophe. The Thebans, led by Epaminondas, who apparently didn't get the memo about Spartan invincibility, not only crushed Sparta's army, but went on to liberate Messenia, the region where most of Sparta's helots lived and worked. The ever-shrinking citizen pool directly contributed to Sparta's defeat at Leuctra. Remember, they only had about 1,500 full citizens by then, which meant their core army of elite Spartan warriors was dangerously small. Epaminondas exploited this weakness brilliantly. He concentrated his forces against the Spartan right wing, which is where the best troops were positioned. When these elite troops were destroyed, Sparta simply didn't have the manpower reserves to replace them. The loss was catastrophic. 400 of 700 Spartiates present were killed. This included a large portion of the remaining citizen class. Their survivors were called tremblers and lost civil rights, further shrinking the citizen pool because they didn't go out on their shields. The defeat showed how Sparta's exclusive citizenship had created a military glass cannon with several elite but irreplaceable troops. Once those troops were gone, they couldn't maintain control over their helot population. Suddenly, Sparta lost access to a huge chunk of its slave labor force, which didn't work with their "we're too good to farm" attitude. Imagine a bunch of aristocrats standing in a field wondering which end of a plow to hold. This, friends, is what historians called oliganthropia, or fewness of men. Spartans basically created a demographic death spiral through its own policies, and now they had fewer slaves to do the work they were too proud to do themselves. Now, by 3rd century BCE, some Spartans finally realized they might have a problem. Enter our would-be reformers, Agis IV and Cleomenes III, who tried to fix things but found out that suggesting rich people to give up their wealth is a good way to make enemies. First, Agis IV had some solid ideas. Cancel all debts, always a crowd pleaser among the poor, redistribute land into 4,500 equal plots for citizens, create 15,000 more plots for skilled non-citizens, and he even offered to give up his own wealth first. How did that work out? He got betrayed and executed along with his mother and grandmother. So, not great. Cleomenes III looked at Agis' failure and thought, you know what this needs? More violence. He built up a military success first, which was pretty smart. Then he launched a coup against the aristocrats and killed all but one, canceled debts, redistributed land, expanded citizenship, and then restored traditional Spartan education. And it was working until it wasn't. See, Cleomenes' success scared his neighbors so much that they decided they'd rather be dominated by Macedon than let Sparta be great again. The resulting war ended in Cleomenes fleeing to Egypt, where he later died in a failed uprising against Ptolemy IV because apparently one failed revolution wasn't enough for him. So, what can we learn from Sparta's decline? Well, there's a few things for sure. Number one, maybe don't base your entire society on maintaining an impossibly pure citizen class while sitting on top of a massive population of people who hate you. Number two, if you're going to have strict citizenship requirements, maybe make sure that people can actually meet them instead of creating a system where wealth concentrates in fewer and fewer hands. Number three, when someone tries to reform your obviously broken system, consider not killing them. Maybe they have a point. And number four, if you're going to try to dismiss help during a crisis, maybe don't do it in a way that insults one of the rising powers in your region. The real irony, many of Sparta's problems came from trying too hard to preserve their traditional way of life. Their obsession with maintaining their pure, unchanged Spartan system made their society so rigid it couldn't adapt to changing circumstances. By trying to stay perfectly Spartan, they ended up destroying what made Sparta powerful in the first place. This is exactly what makes Sparta a fascinating case study in how societies can collapse under the weight of their own traditions and policies. While external pressures played their part, Sparta's greatest enemy was ultimately itself. They created a system so perfect, so pure, and so inflexible that it was almost designed to fail. In the end, Sparta's decline wasn't about losing battles or territory. It was about a society that painted itself into a corner through increasingly restrictive citizenship policies, wealth concentration, and an inability to reform until it was too late. They maintained their purity right into irrelevance, providing future historians with a valuable lesson on how not to run a city-state. But hey, at least they gave us some great movies and comic books, right? Sometimes the most valuable thing a society can provide is an example of what not to do, so we can feel better about our own bad decisions that weren't quite that bad. At least in that respect, Sparta succeeded brilliantly.